Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson and the former executive director of the California Republican Party, John Fleischman from SoDoesItMatter.com. John, as a Republican here, let's start with you.
Sure. Your
take on the midterms, big margin for Andy Biggs tonight, and some really important congressional races.
Well, I mean, I would tell you that I think we're shaping up to see a very big battle in November, because I can tell you, having met Andy Biggs, having spent some time with Andy Biggs, you can try to litigate over, he's a very conservative vote, but personality-wise, demeanor-wise, is the exact opposite of Kari Lake. You no longer have Republicans putting somebody forward who is this bombastic, crazy, extreme person that I think was really scaring a lot of Republicans into not voting Republican. Now, I'm sure the Democrats will, basically go to his very conservative voting record. He's in the House Freedom Caucus and all that, and that's fair game. But in politics, who you are and how you act and how you carry yourself really matters, and I think it's going to make for a very competitive race.
And he's been in office, unlike Kari Lake as well, so people have seen him and voted for him in the past, at least in his congressional race.
Sure.
How do you see all this, Dave, the Arizona race?
I think the Biggs win is a gift for Katie Hobbs. I just think, obviously that's going to be a key battleground for the...
Katie Hobbs, the current Democratic governor who won a very close race against Kari Lake last year, and is widely considered to be the most potentially endangered Democratic governor in the country.
It's ground zero for the Democratic Governors Association, for sure, and it's a frontline protect for Democrats. But he's a more extreme candidate than the other Democrat, Schweiker, who was also a member of Congress. Republican who was running. So I think at a time when you have the president who's deeply unpopular nationwide, Washington Post just put out a poll last week. He's got a 37% favorable rating among self-identified independent voters. 26% approval rating. Those are the voters that are going to determine a race like governor in Arizona.
Well, but I would say in Arizona, I think it's important to remember there are 300 and change thousand more Republicans in that state than there are Democrats. And I do think independents will be important. But the point I really wanted to bring home is if you spend any time interacting with Biggs and Lake, and I've interacted with both of them, night and day personality. And I think it's going to matter because unfortunately or fortunately in politics, people really try to get a sense of people based on how they operate, and he's very, very demure compared to her, but everyone is compared to her.
Not a big endorsement for Kari Lake from the Republican side tonight after she lost multiple elections for the team. Meanwhile, the question is about the midterm elections in Congress as well. Some important races in Arizona tonight. Axios had an interesting scoop. I want to put this up on the screen, saying that Trump's top MAGA advisors gather to plot midterms. Basically, this meeting with Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, some of President Trump's top pollsters, all getting together to talk about strategy on how to win the midterms. And this could get real negative real fast.
Yeah. No doubt. I mean, I think it's a politically advantageous dynamic for them to explore because both parties are deeply unpopular. The Democratic Party, while we have the wind at our back, we've won a lot of these special elections since Donald Trump got sworn into office in the last year and a half. The reality is that the national brand of the Democratic Party is still deeply unpopular, right? I think it's incumbent upon Democrats to basically make their campaign about change and let Trump and Republicans be more of the same. So while the party brand perhaps isn't as popular as we Democrats would like it to be, change is a good thing. And I think if we can make this a change election, we're poised to be successful. I will say also, if you look at the polling on the generic ballot, the New York Times has a polling summary. The top two polls, I think YouGov is the newest one that's out, has Democrats up 5 points. The poll before that has Democrats up 7. If you reverse back to 2018, right before the midterm elections, that blue wave, the generic ballot had Democrats up 8. And then in turn, we won 41 seats in Congress. So if we're hovering around a +5, a +7 on the generic ballot, we are poised to win the House, fingers crossed.
Yeah, of course, there's been a lot of gerrymandering since then, so it's harder to do some of those big wave elections. But that point is interesting. Axios also said, John, that part of the Republican Party is trying to make voters hate the Democratic Party more, using quotes like, voters have to hate the Dems more than they hate us. Yeah, we suck, but they're worse.
I think there's two important things that will have been discussed in the meeting with all of those Trump people behind closed doors, and they're both critical to the election. The first one is that Trump Inc., the broader group, has well over $300 million stashed away in all of its various political committees.
Yeah.
Is that money being held to go to the library? Is that money being held to elect a successor? Or is Donald Trump like, I don't want to be impeached. We're putting $300 million plus into these midterms. That's a huge discussion.
Does not seem to be that last
well, we don't know.
so far.
We don't
right?
know. And then the other question they need to have amongst them is, okay, who here is going to help us with the big guy to maybe get oriented towards what are the things he should be talking about towards the November election? Because giving a primetime speech on national television about the SAVE Act is not going to appeal to swing voters. And so he really needs to get out there and say, what can I do as the president to help Republicans win in November? Maybe they're all sitting around the room going, who knows? Karen, it's your you're the only one.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, and of course, there's also a war with Iran going on,
There is,
which he said was going to be short,
well, that's a
and has
sticky
not
one,
been short. The president talked about that in the midterms today.
Do you believe that Iran is trying to impact the midterm elections by threatening the Strait of Hormuz?
They won't have any impact on me. I'm just going to do the right thing. I don't view it as, gee, we're having an election in a period of time. You know, everyone says, oh, I'm doing something before. No, the election, I can't think about that having to do with this.
I mean, is this problematic for Republicans?
Well, it's not problematic for what he said. Any president should say that. You wouldn't tell the Iranians on national television that I'm focused on
I mean, the war
elections.
itself. The war.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it was. Everyone said he saw what happened in Venezuela. Get in, get out. I think maybe he thought, what, all the bad guys are in one room at the same time. We light it up, and the Israelis go in. I think he's now stuck in a fight that it's very difficult to extricate from. But if he doesn't figure something out, those gas prices are going to be a real problem for Republicans in November.
Well, and Dave, Democrats have this opportunity on Capitol Hill to express some of that anger through these hearings with members of the administration who now need to come to Capitol Hill because they need more money. And so we saw some of that on display with Gary Peters, who is retiring as a senator from Michigan, had one notable exchange with Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary.
You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership?
We have leadership.
When will you show leadership?
Why don't you show some leadership and stand up to your fellow Democrats who won't fund the troops, who stand and play partisan politics while you don't give us the money? You want to stand up here and talk about the troops? You won't show any political courage to actually fund our department because you have Trump derangement syndrome and can't actually commit to anything meaningful.
These are big opportunities for these Democrats in Capitol Hill, though, don't you think?
I think the American people fundamentally don't support this war. The Post put out a poll, 68% of Americans don't want to fight this war, don't think we should be fighting this war, 28% favor it. That gap, that deficit of 40%, is among the largest gaps that you've seen in public polling in modern history on an American war. I think most Americans view this as a stupid war. We should never have gone. And people are seeing their costs skyrocket. The cost of food, the cost of gasoline, clothes. People are struggling across this country. And here you have this president totally disconnected from average Americans who are just trying to get by and make ends meet.
But we've seen in the past, sometimes these hearings can be a springboard for campaigns. When Kamala Harris was in the Senate, they were very effective for her in sort of increasing her name.
Most of what happens under the Capitol Dome these days is all about these Instagram moments and all that.
Yeah,
but I would say
those matter. Those go to a lot of people. I mean, John Ossoff's getting a lot of followers from this.
He would, but I would say that, the president gave his nationwide address. He needs to give another one. The president has yet to really effectively go out and make his case about why he went in, why it needs to be won. You can't win an argument if you're not having the discussion. And he really needs to engage with the American people. He really needed to do that before he went in, but it's never too late when American lives are on the line to explain to the American people why we're there, why we're doing it, what's going on.
We know he likes to make points when he has points to make. Maybe the fact that he hasn't said that is an indication that he doesn't have that much of a case to be made.
Smart political minds like you can get inside of the head of the president. We people over here just kind of sit back and
we can analyze.
John, Dave, thank you both. Great to see both of you.